So this is not a partisan video on behalf of whether we should be getting the extended cut or not. I'm just going to strictly go through what is plausibly what was left out and what could be included in an extended cut. So what did we miss? Well, quite a few things. We have UA handing Paul an OC Bible. We have a critical scene with Jessica and UA talking about his wife. We have Gurney playing a musical instrument, which we see in the movie, but we don't see him playing it. There's a scene between Paul and Two-Fear, which is confirmed by the actor, where they talk after the Hunter-Seeker incident. Also, the Jam Kabar scene is much more extended. It was a lot longer than it appears in the movie. We also see Duncan Idaho actually meet the Fremen. Essentially, he parachutes in and meets with the locals. And he refers to this in the movie, but we don't see it. And finally, we do in fact get a banquet scene. So the banquet scene, which is in the novel, was done, but they ultimately decided not to use it. There's also apparently some scenes where Jessica more explicitly trains Paul, presumably in the voice, but other things like the weirding way. So quite a few things are missing, but how much of this matters? And here people are very split. So some people say that the UA scene was really critical because the UA twist really confused them. And apparently this is even the book readers. They just felt that the way Yui acted was way too erratic. The twist where he betrays them just comes out of nowhere. I myself differ. I think there were enough hints and clues, and I think it was actually cleverly done with editing. Why Paul asked, why is Dr. Yue here? But again, that's me. A lot of people felt it was very, very erratic, and we needed that scene to really establish why Yue does what he does. In terms of the other things, it's a little bit iffy. I myself would have preferred seeing Duncan. I think him meeting the Fremen would have really, really helped with the mythology because I was fearful we would get very zero of the Fremen, but we actually got quite a little bit of their culture. So that scene would have been great because, again, Paul also is very positive about the Fremen based on the Idaho testimony, but again, it feels a little abstract because we don't actually see them meeting with one another, so it feels weird. And of course, the behavior of Stilgar when he comes in very brutal and forward doesn't make a whole lot of sense if this is our first time seeing the Fremen, so they come off a little bit primitive or brutish. Presumably that scene would have cured that. And finally, we get to the Mentats, and probably the Mentats are the ones that were really left out of this picture. I can kind of understand the banquet scene. It may have been a little bit too dry. Now, in the novel, it's critical. It gives you a lot of information, and Frank Herbert himself really thought it was critical. If you really want it, you can see it in the sci-fi version. I'm a little less partisan on that. I think, yes, it gives us a lot of world building, and that was sorely needed here, but again, it's a trade-off. If you have the banquet scene, you may not get other scenes. And the scenes with Jessica training Paul, that's fascinating, but was it critical? I think we got enough that Paul is very mindful they're under constant threat. But the Two-Fear scene is very puzzling in why that was left out. It's not like we don't have anything. We actually have an interesting little photo where the Sardaukar are surrounding Two-Fear. So we have gotten a few little bits and pieces, but yeah, leaving that scene with Two-Fear out is a little weird because the back and forth that him and Leto have sounds strange, but when given in the context of Paul thanking Two-Fear for his training and that's how he was saved, and explicitly acknowledging that it was Two-Fear and his training that basically saved his life with the Hunter Seeker, that would have helped a lot because really the Mentats are given very little to do. It's still impressive, especially when we see Two-Fear's eyes go white. And really, Pitter probably gets the least amount to do. He's just sort of reduced to being a helper who encourages the Baron to be evil. But given what we know is going to happen with Two-Fear, if they're going to stay faithful to the book, it's going to seem a little lopsided when there's a lot of Two-Fear in part 2, but not a lot of Two-Fear in part 1. So probably I'd agree the Mentat scene and the UA scene were very critical. The UA scene I don't care that much about. I don't think it was that critical, but a lot of fans were really outraged that that scene was got rid of. It's quite a lot that we didn't get and that we missed out. And again, there were a lot of changes from the scripts as well, because there's not one version of the script, there's several different versions. And apparently one version did have more extended discussion on the Butlerian Jihad. They've cut quite a lot out, and I think that accounts for the mixed reception among some fans that it's understandable he had to pick and choose, but what he ultimately decided to keep but what he left out is still puzzling a lot of fans. Quite a lot left out. I assume some of this will be resurrected in Blu-ray deleted scenes, but again, there are no promises. But again, if you're hardcore, yeah, it would be nice to see Garney with his musical instrument, but again, how many people would really understand this, would know this, would care about this? Again, we have to consider the non-hardcore fans. It's very mixed, but yeah, I definitely think at least one or two of these scenes really would have been nice, and it's kind of puzzling that he just didn't delete or trim out other scenes to make room for these scenes. But we're going to be debating this for quite a while. But as far as I know, this is what we missed, and this is what we could have in an extended version. Thanks for listening.